Welcome to day 6 of our study of the book of Ecclesiastes. The title of today's lesson is, Why Then Have I Been So Very Wise? Our verses for today come from Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 12 through 17. So I turn to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, What happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity and a striving after wind. One of the sobering aspects of being President of the United States is that the Chief of State gets the honor, or laborious task, of planning his own funeral, and thus have a part in steering his legacy. This, according to the White House Historical Association, occurs shortly after they have been sworn in as president. Not every detail is planned out, but the general outline of whether or not they want a state funeral, where they are to be buried, whether they are to lie in state, if they want to be borne along Pennsylvania Avenue in a horse-drawn caisson or in a motorcade. There is a protocol involved upon the death of a president. I've been alive for the president's funerals from John F. Kennedy's in 1963 up through George Bush, who passed away in 2018. In particular, there have been several presidents wherein their legacy left behind has been spotlighted. Those legacies extend well beyond their presidencies, and yes, beyond their lifetime. Such is the weight of the life they lived and the decisions they made, good and bad. I've also had the opportunity to visit many presidential libraries. They too concentrate on the successes and focus of their terms in office. Webster's dictionary defines legacy as anything handed down from the past as from an ancestor or predecessor. One of the defining aspects of leadership on all levels is the idea of the legacy handed down after your departure. Too often it might be the last actions of a leader that leave the lasting memory, but in reality it is the whole body of their work. Solomon in today's lesson is concerned with his legacy. Before his next venture, Solomon pauses to consider his body of work. He turns back to wisdom to consider what, if any, benefit it should have over folly. It is as if he revisits the same argument from chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there's nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, See, this is new? It has been already in ages before us. Now, Solomon realizes that whoever comes after him cannot achieve what he has. In verses 12 of Ecclesiastes 2, we read, So I turn to consider wisdom and the madness of folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. It occurs that he does have an advantage with wisdom over folly. Verses 13 through 14, Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. The wise person, wisdom being their light, is guided by that light. The fool, on the other hand, only gropes in darkness and knows not what awaits. Where have we seen this before? Why, it's what his work of Proverbs has declared from the beginning to end. We read in Proverbs chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance, to understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. But Solomon, are you questioning your work of Proverbs? Have you not helped the simple to become wise? Didn't the very nature of your body of work show the way of wisdom in a person's life to be far superior to that of folly? Yes, for this life. But now you are faced with what comes next. Verse 15 reads, Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. We have the advantage of not only knowing Solomon's conclusion at the end of this book, but also the supreme advantage of knowing what the eternal outcome of man will be. As we read in the New Testament in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 10 through 12, Peter writes, concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully, inquiring what person or time the Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the subsequent glories. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves, but you in the things that have now been announced to you through those who preach the good news to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. For even Jesus said this when he revealed to his disciples in Matthew 13:11. To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. And again in Matthew 13, verses 16 through 17. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. For all of Solomon's wisdom, what he saw was only based on the immediate rewards of wisdom in this life. What he failed to understand ultimately was his legacy would not be just the tangible accomplishments, but that which he, like those prophets and wise people before Christ, only saw with eyes of flesh. What Solomon needed was eyes of faith, that which the New Testament writer of Hebrews describes for us in Hebrews chapter 11. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it, the people of old received their commendation. What Solomon hopes for, he achieves by his own wisdom. Yet that is his only reward. He does, however, perceive that there must be something beyond this temporal satisfaction of accomplishments here on earth. He will laboriously trudge along, and in the end will understand this. The legacy he will pass along will outlast all of his earthly accomplishments, which have long since been trodden underfoot and only exist in the dust of time. Have you felt that way about your earthly endeavors? And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow for another lesson from the book of Ecclesiastes.